Hello world of YouTube and welcome to Listening Log Update for August of 2024. I have 12 albums from the last month that I've been spinning that I'll be talking about in this video with time codes listed in the description. As always, if you want to skip around to individual reviews, there was some catch up I had to do, something off my back burner I wanted to address, along with some immense hype generated through some surprise releases and some long-anticipated releases. Some really fun stuff dropped this month that I'm happy to talk with you about. So let's go ahead and get started. Like they did so long ago. Jack White's been on a bit of a creative gamut post the melting pot that was Boarding House Reach. He had his duology of guitar, mad science, wizardry, and real beautiful sincerity on Fear of the Dawn and Entering Heaven Alive, which was a really nice treat. However, I don't think anybody was expecting him to release this initially vinyl-only, nameless album that was the bluesiest, rawest album he's been a part of since, like, 2001, while the most Jack White thing you could think of was still a shock to at least me. The album itself is also fucking stacked. The production is raw, his guitar sounds ripped straight out of the style, and the songwriting is a lot more concise on top of that. And not in a way that I would say was, like, very derivative on, like, Lazaretto, but more feels like an artist trying to recapture that, you know, electrifying energy that captivated his fans from a young age. This has the recipe for being a massive flop on paper, but it's just not, because Jack knows, at the end of the day, how to write some great-ass riffs and some relatively catchy rock songs on top of that. You know, Old Scratch Blues and Bless Yourself have the workings of, like, the dusting off the shelf, so to speak. But this is how I'm feeling, is where the album really starts to pick up and carry itself into some really great, you know, realms. It's Rough on Rats sounds like something pulled out of a one-night bar performance with some fun leads that lead into this explosive back half. What's the Rumpus is the same kind of swagger he had been championing, especially on Fear of the Dawn, but still fits so snugly within this lo-fi coded experience. Morning and Midnight has that same kind of, like, mystifying energy that was on, like, Fear of the Dawn, but again, it fits so snugly in the world he's painting on No Name. And I honestly, thoroughly, through and through, think this is a strong-ass release from Jack during a run where he has been just consistently dropping banger records. This is absolutely another notch in that belt. It's very straightforward. It's not too bogged down with high concepts. It's just a good, cut-and-dry rock album that I think was a delight to experience as a longtime fan. I'm gonna be giving this a 9. I mean, I know that it's, like, very back to basics and, you know, very stripped back, but I think when the songs rip this hard and it is still this concise, you just can't go wrong with it, in my opinion.
See, I discovered hip-hop through Volume 1. Tarantino hit the RZA, left the whole world stunned. Now I heard
You know, the last time Logic made a soundtrack for a book, it was arguably his worst album ever made, was Supermarket. I'm glad he kind of retooled his thinking on making a soundtrack for a piece of work, because Ultra 85 fits a bit better in his discography, sonically, while also lyrically sort of, like, stemming off of some of the sort of branches he had been stewing with, especially on Vinyl Days, and I think that the soundscape of this feels more cut from that project, while also having some moments where it feels like he's trying to create a more well-rounded view from some of the, like, pseudo-philosophies he was spinning on a record like The Incredible True Story. And that's not even the stop of, like, the deep well that is this record. It's a record that's been long kept away from the public from Logic. It was leaked. It's got like a story with it, while also using the parallels of like uneasy space travel to speak on sort of his current place. It's a record that feels really grounded for how bold it tries to go, which I would argue has been one of the biggest issues I've had with some of the grander concepts in Logic's discography. He wants to rap with this higher concept, but doesn't really go that deep with it. And I think that keeping it more personal while drawing parallels to that throughout this journey is a much more fruitful experience. There's also just some really cool beat ideas on here that I think make for an engaging listen on top of that. I mean, open it up with this 9-minute jam. Paul Rodriguez creates this mission statement-ass moment to help set the stage for this hour-plus odyssey, which I would argue, unlike other artists that make these longer records, does more with its beefier runtime. He really tries to play this bold gamut on top of all that. You know, these great soul sample woven boom bap tracks like Ghost in the Machine, or the very idiosyncratic Deja Vu, which feels like Logic on Logic by Logic standards. But you've also got tracks like the banger-ass Antidote with Z-Lopers, or the drum and bass-filled Love Me. You've got the interlude 44 Ever, which feels like a sort of bookend to like some planting moments from earlier in his career. It's an album that shoots with a lot. You know, it aims for the conceptual stars. I just like that it sort of grounds itself. Hell, Fear is this straight-up synth disco jam that, like, as far as out there ideas he's doing on these book soundtracks, it could have fallen a lot flatter than it did. I think Fear is honestly a pretty solid jam. I think shit like the chopping up that happens on Gardens 3, that I think is sick as fuck. Do I think Logic spins in circles a little bit rapping-wise? Sure, but that's always been kind of a thing with Logic, and I think that while he utilizes this runtime well, there's still a couple tracks that consistent listens have just seen me liking less and less. But the hit ratio on this is really fucking good. And I think that, like, if you enjoy Logic's music, there's a wealth of stuff in here for fans to come through and enjoy. I think it's solid as fuck. Give this a 7 out of 10. You know, I think that it's a really strong outing, and I can appreciate him for keeping it consistent this time around.
I do it eventually.
Peggy's had a hell of a year. Between beefs with Freddie Gibbs that seemingly went nowhere outside of coming up potentially on some shots on this, and linking up with Kanye West, an action that may have led to some aspects of Vultures 2, a record I won't be spinning, also came with a bigger set of eyes on him, a lot of which, threw a lot of shade at Peggy, especially from his core fan base. Something that I also kind of partook in a little bit. But I'm not going to use this review today to continue to slam Peggy. Hell, the only reason why I'm really bringing it up is because that part in particular feels like a heavy focus on some of the tracks on here, lyrically speaking, and it helps kind of shape the mood. You know, while Peggy's always had this kind of like aggressive, almost combative sense to his bar spinning, there's usually been some like touches of like irony to some degree coded throughout some of that and some of the scathing bars, but I feel like this record in particular feels like a point where Peggy kind of strips a lot of that away just to really speak on where he's at or where he feels at, which I would argue is also an aspect of LP, which I would argue is probably his best album to date thus far. But I like that mood kind of helps shape the project sonically in some regards as well. You know, there's a hint of not necessarily exhaustion, but just a more grounded view in some of the sounds that comes on here. While I really appreciate Peggy's propensity to create these off-kilter, unsettling, or just out-there beats, there's a handful of moments on here where he just kind of interpolates that off-kilterness into some more straightforward jams. You know, while that same fire and passion is seen, especially when it comes to critiquing those that are critiquing him on tracks like The Opener and on Sin Medio, and some of that anger gets pivoted elsewhere on tracks like Ex-Military, and some of that sort of like attitude gets funneled into some really good collaborations like JPEG Ultra and New Black History, which see two shining stars from this year. given some love to this project. By the end of it, on tracks like Either On or Off Drugs, Loop It and Leave It, and On I Recover From This, there's a sort of ennui that Peggy reaches that I think helps further add a lot more sincerity to some of the weight that he's talking about on here, which I can really appreciate. And that's not to say that he loses some of that more out there ideas, you know, the instrumental like It's Dark and Hell is Hot, where Peggy's just playing Peggy. But I like that there is a very much through line on here that has this nice payoff to a lot of the noise that's sort of generated on here. And I think this is a pretty good album. I don't think it's my favorite of his.
My dumbass never scored this album. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Because I think that, like, the sincerity is great. And I like the overall trajectory of the album. I just think that some of his album's production is a little better. And even if it's not quite as clean as this, because this shit sounds clean, far exceed what he's got going on here. But this is still pretty fucking good.
Tastes like metal. I'm not afraid to see you make it.
Philadelphian art rock outfit Man Man's career is something that I really kind of have to fill myself in on, because I'm aware of their roots thanks to Shake, and I've been more familiar with their newer stuff given I covered their last album back in 2020. But there had to have been a point where they, like, just did a hard pivot. Because my biggest thing with their last is that I enjoyed the oddities, but I felt like they weren't quite as bold with it as I'd remember them being. And I feel myself feeling the same in some regards on Carrot on Strings, but I think that they've done a better job at, like, bridging some of those, you know, offbeat ideas with better, more straightforward, hook-driven songs. You know, you still got songs like the over 6 minute Cryptode, which feels like the inner monologue at a party, surrounded by people talking about shit you just want to get away from. Or even tracks like Pack Your Bags and Cherry Cowboy feel like more like a buffered version of some of the quirkiness that I had seen them exhibit in the past, with like quirky little synth groove carrying Pack Your Bags, or some twang buried beneath Cherry Cowboy that adds a little bit of flavor in the album's back half. You've even got softer moments like the piano-driven Mongolian Spot that helps sort of keep the energy in flux in some good ways. I just wish that there were more ideas like the Boulder Closer Odyssey or Cryptode, or moments like the interlude-esque title track that really sort of throws some weird wrenches in the pot. I wish were more of the lifeblood of this record, as it were, as opposed to the more hook-driven stuff, like the opener Iguana, or Tastes Like Metal, or Alibi, which are great songs. I would argue Iguana might be the best song on the album. But those moments feel like they are the real highlights, or like Mulholland Drive, which is a really great euphoric jam. I feel like it comes at a weird point on the album, but I think that it helps send this somewhat bleak viewpoint into this good rush throughout that song's chorus. And that's not to say that those moments weigh the record down. Similarly to their last record, I just kind of wish that there was more of some of that off-kilter identity that I sort of see from this band. But this is still a solid-ass album, and I feel like if you like good, artful rock music that does write with purpose from time to time, this is a pretty solid album. I'm giving it a 7. It sounds great, it's got some good jams, and it's got some weirdness. I just wish there was a little more here.
So I got high.
I've been a Beabadoobee fan for a hot minute at this point, it feels like, and I've always appreciated her experiments and excursions on adapting alternative rock into a modern scope, at least as she's done throughout her album work in particular. I thought Beatopia, her previous outing, was a really nice, lovely pivot for her to take that I think made for her best album to date. And with This Is How Tomorrow Moves, she's further going down the branches of alt-rock, bringing together this culmination of songs that feel like look-backs on a relationship that should have dissolved a long time ago, with a production palette that I think kneecaps her ideas more than it does help them, which was a big revelation to me once I learned who to handle the production on this project. It's one Rick Rubin, who has classics in his belt, but I would argue, especially over the last 15-20 years, has been one of the more inconsistent legacy producers in music. And a great example of what I feel like can set back songs that he has a hand in, it's One Time. Easily one of the best highlights on the album to me. It's a really good dissection of, like, trying to buck the trend of just getting by one more day with a partner that you just aren't meant to be with. And it's a song that coalesces into a really nice climax that I think is absolutely ruined by Rick Rubin's brand of production. That's not to say it sounds bad across the board, which is honestly one of its bigger glaring criticisms I could throw it in hindsight, because I do think that that approach does help some of the more intimate moments, like Girl Song, really stand strong. And I even think moments like the euphoric rush that's seen on Ever Seen isn't necessarily given the same sort of setting back by its production, given it's got these big booming sounds. You know, I do like the guitar explosions that occur on tracks like Beaches and California. They evoke the more laid-back energy this album really brings to the forefront and help kind of spice up what is admittedly a little more of a mid-tempo listening experience. And I think they help add these dynamics that the album could feel like it's missing in some instances due to those production ideas. You know, take a song like Real Man, another song that is a little more intimate and stripped back, but I think that the bold production kind of strips away a lot of that intimacy in a way that isn't seen elsewhere on the record. I don't know. I'm of a couple of minds of this. I think the songs are really strong still, and I think the emotional core is still kept consistent throughout this listen, and I think that, again, musically speaking, Beabadoobee's really crafting a good, you know, engaging experience through and through. Again, it's just kind of the production that sets this album back. It's still a solid-ass album, though. I'm still giving this a 7. I still think that it's a strong outing from her, and I think that it serves as another really fun but smaller pivot in her style that I think she, by the by, sticks the landing on more than not.
There's a place I wanna go, 'cause my mom and pop ain't fine at home.
King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard decided to revisit another genre that they've dipped into the past on this newest record, Flight B741, and while I was lukewarm on their re-diving back into thrash that they did last year, I was still morbidly curious on what their, you know, new version of that sort of 70s inspired boogie rock would sound like. And I gotta say, on the other end of this flight, I think I like this more than Fishing for Fishes, which is admittedly not my favorite King Gizzard project. I think that their attempt on, like, a boogie rock sound on there is solid. You know, admittedly, I don't respin it as much as other records in theirs that I like, which is part of the reason maybe why. But I think that their time crafting records like Changes helped them sort of get a better feel for this sound in a way that I think is very much nice to see. Because, again, I enjoy what they got going on at Fishing for Fishes, and listening to this makes me want to respin that record, which is probably a good sign. But I think that, like, where they, you know, double down on the lyrics also seen on there and have been cropping up a lot in their lyrics, especially in the veins of, like, environmentalism, still feel at home in this, and if anything, get further pushed out there with, like, the focusing on, like, animals in the lyrics and on, like, the album art and stuff. I think that one of the things that also further helps sell is the production on this. You know, I like the production of Fishing for Fishes again. I want to respin it after spinning this and spending some time with this, because I love the production on this, but I don't feel it being too different than what it was on Fishing for Fishes. One element, along with the groove construction and sort of philosophy that I think the band had been experimenting with over the last couple of records helping here, is the production. You know, I like the production on this thing by and large. It very much has moments where it feels very much in line with where King Gizzard likes to produce their stuff. But stuff like the drum production helps cement the listener more in that inspiration in a way that I think kind of sticks out more than it did on Fishing for Fish. On top of that, their guitar, you know, while having moments while it gets kind of crunchy in that iconic Gizzard way, there are moments like Hog Calling Contest where that ramp that twang up even more. I also think that the harmony work on here, by and large, especially in some of the hook work like in Argentina or throughout Raw Feel, help give that 70s vibe. You know, I like the use of harmonica on a lot of this, but I will say if there's one point that I can harp on the production, is I think that the production doesn't help the harmonica pop in the way that I feel like it should, especially if it's going to be the lead. Like, there's one thing if it's, like, in the back of parts of, like, Field of Vision, but it's, like, the lead on the title track. And I think if you're going to have the harmonica lead your song, it's got to, like, it's really got to sing, man. But by and large, I like a lot of what this album has going on. I think that it's not... I don't think I'd put it amongst my favorites in the band's catalog if I were looking at the Great Echelon, but I do think it is an improvement on their last excursion on this. As of right now, I'm teetering on a 7 or an 8. I'm going to put it at a 7, but I think that, honestly, it could end up at like a low 8 by the end of the year. I also want to respend Fishing for Fishes because I do think it's an improvement. But if I end up liking Fishing for Fishes more than I used to, then I'd say that I like this more at the end of the day.
Like bitches be losing a plot, and that's how I got to the top. And no, I don't got any ops. Like why would I be for
Even if I was like relatively mild on parts of Ice Spice's EP from the beginning of last year, like I even went into this album Y2K with like lowered expectations. While some of the initial teasers I was like, okay, it's gonna be more of this. Like the teasers she had been teasing outside of the very meme stuff like Thank You the Shit. Like Gimme a Light I thought had like some decent energy, and I was like, if she pivots with some stuff like this, I'd be into some of this. And while I think this record gets off on like the best foot it could with what Ice Spice has been making, like Fat Butt, I think she matches that instrumental's energy pretty well. I also think it's one of the better instrumentals. But after that, the album really takes just kind of a steep drop off into like Fat Butt being what like feels like it's carrying the energy from like being just further solidified as a mission statement with Osh, a track that I don't think is really that great. But I also think that like the energy she's firing off with on the next stretch of tracks after that, up until really the only other song from this album I like, Gimme a Light, just isn't the vibe. IMO. Like, yeah, some of the instrumentals are fine. Like, I enjoy the beats on Did It First and BB Belt, but God, like, I think the beat to Bitch I'm Packin' is honestly kind of wasted, if anything, because, I mean, damn, that low end just rumbles, and Ice Spice doesn't match that. And in fact, I think like is the peak of like where the energy just kind of really pivots, because like I get the sensual rap banger, but I think Ice Spice's version of that just doesn't have the bars to match that energy. But then Plenty Sun takes a real swift deep dive that I wasn't expecting, and I just think really just kind of isn't good. I think like, and I don't think she does any favors over the next couple of tracks. It's just again, the album really stumbles. This project isn't good. It's gonna be up there on that worst of the year list. I don't know where Ice Spice is gonna go from here, but I have even less personal investment. I'm giving this like a 2. I should give it a 2 for the 2 tracks I like. A 2 for the 10. It's 10 songs. I like 2 tracks. By and large, 2 out of 10. While this is not my first excursion with math rock instrumental outfit, and So I Watch You From Afar. It is my first time talking about them on the channel. I got into them through their 2017 album, The Endless Shimmering, which I thought was really solid. It was a very good, well-produced series of instrumental rock tracks that had some fun energy weaving across the track listing. And while I missed their 2022 album, this album, Megafauna, is more of that, if not a little bit better, at least I feel it is, on the other side of this album. I think that it knows where to hook the listener, whether it's a catchy-ass guitar lead or an infectious drum, that dances with the guitar. They just do a good job at keeping the listener invested, in my opinion, while also continuing to have great production that showcases and gives their talents pockets to shine in all the right ways. I think that it gets off on this great energetic foot with North Coast Megafauna, which could be seen as a title track. I think that the places it goes across its sort of lead dancing on Do More are kinetic and infectious and kind of a fun little pivot. The album breaks it down and mellows out across moments like the Mother Belfast two-parter, where it has some really great reverb guitars and some sort of more, not laid back, but just mellower grooves that lead into some fun stomping moments, It's also a great album, I feel like, for the, months to come. It's got that sort of reverb-soaked energy that if you're a fan of, like, emo music, or again, math rock, you'll enjoy the sonic tapestry of. Moments like the drum groove on Any Joy, or that just crunchy guitar production on Button Days, we'll know what I'm talking about when it comes to that fall energy. I really like this thing. I think that if you like instrumental rock music, it's a good highlight for me from this year that I've heard. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. I think that it's a choice project. It'll end up somewhere on my top 50, I'm sure. I just don't know where.
I don't care if I don't sleep, but someone bad.
To say I was excited for Magdalena Bay's follow-up to what I'd argue is one of the strongest debut albums I've heard in a long time, with Imaginal disc, that'd be an understatement. But to also be so happy that it lives up to all of the expectations I had for it and more on the other side is a level of gratification that I hope to have come across in this review today. I really enjoyed their production and sheen and their indulges in nostalgia, the raw material world, and I would say that it still happens throughout a lot of the tapestries of Imaginal disc, but I really appreciate how they cement it all under this umbrella of dreamlike dread, because so many of these songs, especially by their end, come to this moment where fear or unnervingness sort of settles in. Moments like the psychedelic washes, moments like the warbly synths and funky ass bass line on Image evoke that turn of the millennium vibe that still gets its toes in nostalgia, because we're in peak 2000s nostalgia, baby. It's what they were very ahead of the curve on, I would argue, on Mercurial World, and very much just fit back into the groove of so snugly on it. While also going into things like what I would argue was the early 90s, adult contemporary vibe on Fierce Sex, which has this abrasive-ass synth production that I think kind of reminds me of what the Black Queen was doing on their first couple of records. It also has a moment that sort of dives into the unsettling chords and just adds to that sort of dreadful back end that I think the album continues to resolve around just so well. It also has this nice sort of through line as the album progresses, and it dives deeper into the personal well. While Killing Time is in the beginning, it sort of lavishes in the time spent doing nothing. You're just killing time. Gets inverted on watching TV as the album starts to go into its back half. A moment where it sort of looks back on the wasted moments and sees it as a detriment now. Watching TV is also the perfect execution. Also, watching TV is also just a fantastic moment where this slow groove kind of like evolves, and you see some fun like synth moments on it, and it is a just again pristinely produced smash. I also think it's an album that utilizes its concept of interludes well. They add to the experience of what they're trying to push forth in the deeper trenches. Because while there's like an overarching sort of, you know, first theme where the lyrics go hard on like time and its evolution and, you know, one's own feeling within, it feels like an album where the more that you put in, the more you could get out to a degree. Because its use of sound, its use of, you know, production style all lend to the air of the POV of the one reflecting, the one with the imaginal disc. It's also an album that ends in a way that I've seen can be thrown to starting Mercurial World, where the discography kind of loops back on itself, which is also just a je ne sais quoi moment. They even seemingly, like, reused some of the groove that they pulled together for, Lil Yachty on Running Out of Time for his album on Love Is Everywhere, and I honestly am kind of okay with it. That song fucking rips, and what they do with that sort of same funky energy on there, choice as hell. This album of the year contender. Love this album a lot. I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. It fucking rips. If you like good pop music, or if you like pop music in general, it is absolutely an album that you should be listening to. Especially if you love nostalgia. And who the fuck doesn't love nostalgia nowadays?
Get you droppy, shout out my shtick. Everything's copy. I'm with the pack. They call me Packy. I'm with the pack.
I already knew Veena was coming out after I covered La Fondar earlier this year, because Heems is on a bit of a creative pilgrimage and resurgence this year. And Veena sees him taking that creative, collaborative energy he had on the still tongue-in-cheek and, you know, socially driven La Fondar, and pivots it into a much more personal realm on Veena that also sees him dipping his creative toes into other types of production to back himself with, that I would say creates an experience that's at least equal to La Fondar for very different reasons. You know, I really appreciate that up front he starts with the pure focus of this record, which is his mom and sort of the relationship he's had with his past, as gets sort of further, very directly and intimately fleshed out over Ratatouille and Manto, where he talks about going to rehab and confronting his drug addictions, and going into therapy and going deeper as to what brought him to that level of addiction that he had reached, in the veins of, like, generational trauma and the like. It's not to say it loses sight of upbeat energy or, you know, moments where Heems feels like he's stepping out and going out in the town. I mean, you've got Bourdain and Rocky, where he trying to kind of channels both that boom bap love he's nourished, and pays tribute to, like, the drill vibe that's on the rise, especially in the New York scene. It feels like an album where an artist who helped solidify trends that were up on the rise in hip-hop, further throwing his hat into a couple of rings, while also having this really heartfelt come around by its end, with the likes of Dame feeling more like sincere love songs, which gets spun into an overall optimistic view on the world on Banshee, where Heems finally acknowledges that he is actually creatively back in it, you know, and he's, you know, told that this is the middle piece of a trilogy, and I'm curious to see if he continues to pillage on those positive horizons in this third part. But as it stands, I think this is a great album. It's a concise, well-constructed record that I think was interesting to see Heems dip into. I like some of the sonic realms he tries to experiment with. You know, the ambient-driven tracks act as a good sort of pairing with the boom bap and the abrasive drill stuff that he dives into. And I think that, by the by, I like this for the same reason I loved, like, Denzel's Melt My Eyes, whereas I like La Fondar for the same reasons that I like the Black Thought Danger Mouse album Cheat Codes. I'm still giving this a 9, because it's another really strong outing from Heems this year, but I really like that he goes even harder on the sincere edge and grounds some of that postmodernism.
Please, 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 don't bring me to tears when
You know, I'd known more about Sabrina Carpenter than I realized by the time I'd seen that this album was coming out and figured I should actually listen to a Sabrina Carpenter album in full. And I've liked some of her songs in the past. I think Nonsense is a decent enough pop jam that I think is cool, that she has a fun creative twist she does live. I do think that some of the singles from this have been equally infectious and curiosity-piquing in a different sort of sense. You know, I've enjoyed Espresso as much as a lot of people have expressed when it comes to pop singles from the year. It's a definite highlight. And I enjoy the hook of Please, 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 and I like the very theatrical-esque sort of storytelling that happens in the verses. You know, I think she has some fun vocal work on that track. I wish the song was produced a little differently to let some of the other musical elements sort of ring a bit louder, especially when it comes to inspiration and the like. But I think it's a really good sort of look at the core of the relationship that this album has sort of carrying throughout its themes and narrative. You know, it's a record of summer flings, it seems like. You know, the album is called Short and Sweet. It said it's at a short and sweet runtime. You know, you have the passionate breakup that opens this with Taste, where it talks about what you're leaving behind before pivoting into the now, while sonically and narratively, Sabrina and, you know, the producers kind of bring this very bright and shimmery pop experience that, again, has some moments where I think that production and the hook weaving and the storytelling all coalesces into some good shining moments. I think that Bedchem being the song that comes before it is some great sequencing. You know, I think that it sort of helps drive home that passion that the album's trying to carry through. Lyric spinning in its verses is, like, fun. It's sort of like a deeper version of what happens on Please, Please, Please that I think is alright, but isn't necessarily my favorite when it comes to, like, those type of songs. But I think that Juno being this moment where the album sort of builds to this really good eruption, I think helps send the album into its final moments very strongly. I think that Juno's a really good highlight in my opinion. But I will say, to pivot into the moments that I don't necessarily love, I think the album kind of stumbles in its conclusion. I think that Lyta Girls is a very forward but purposefully done climax. I just don't think the album rounds that out in any meaningful way. Actually ending the album on Don't Smile gives the album this sort of tongue-in-cheek but not as gratifying conclusion that a song that direct and grand would sort of be followed by, in my opinion. Especially following Juno prior to that, which helps sort of tee up that final moment to be something, and I just don't think Don't Smile necessarily hits that punctuation all that well. While I enjoy the more acoustically driven but hazy, dumb, and poetic as a more lower key moment, I think that some of the more acoustically driven moments, like Coincidence and Slim Pickens, don't necessarily pull off their own musical style all that gracefully, in my opinion. Slim Pickens in general has that sort of like plasticine production that I don't think suits the more rootsier percussion that song, or rootsier arrangement that song has all that well. And coincidentally enough, while Coincidence does feature a little more like reverb in there, I don't think that the song is the best version of that. It has some more of that songwriting that I think is kind of like, you know, hit or miss, and I think that the hook spinning on that I just don't think is as strong. It feels like an album cut from a production-wise, and I appreciate that about it, but I don't think that the actual song is all that memorable by proxy. Once the other elements sort of like all come into the light. Like, this album is fine. It's solid. I kept wanting to like it more, but the more that I sat with it, the more a lot of the sort of minutia really started to stick out. The moments that I didn't enjoy, like some of the production on Please, 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 really sort of rang out more of an issue in other songs, and other just damning ways, in my opinion. I'm going to be giving this a 6. It's solid. It's not terrible. It's not the worst pop album I've heard this year, but it's very much the most alright that I've spun this year. Now I'm going to end this month how I've ended the last couple of months by clearing off the back burner with records that I've been sitting with and not talking about on this segment. And this month's back burner clear off is actually a request from Rockin' Movies with Tyler, the newest from this French shoegaze metal outfit, Alcest, Le Chance de l'Aurore, a band that I'm not really familiar with, but I have seen this record getting some praise from friends of mine, and I figured I would give it a shot. Which I gotta say, this record's pretty fucking good. I love that they spend this runtime creating these experiences where they have these cocktails that weave between those two inspirations while having a sound that doesn't feel like it's the same or like derivative in any of the senses of other bands from this scene that I do enjoy. You know, I like that they have moments where they let that harmony and the melody just ring out with these reverb-soaked guitars, like on parts of Amethyst, or on La Fin de la Lune, at least in the beginning portions of that, where they have this like spoken word over this just like this nice ambient guitar. You know, I like that they juxtapose that with stuff like Where That Song Goes, where they just have these dense blast beat filled portions, or the colossal feeling L'Envol, which starts with this just like wall of reverb guitars with this thunderous drums to help add some impact to the sounds going on. This record fucking rips, while also taking the time to really slow it down, like the almost interlude-esque Reminiscence, which isn't super short, but in comparison to a lot of the record, has this nice sort of like moment of brevity amidst these movements that the band takes you on, while also taking the time to create these bigger euphoric rushes of just huge harmonies, like on Flamme Jumelle or on the closer Les Deux, which I think sort of help tie these ideas together and help add this, you know, great experience for the listener. I think that this is a strong outing. One of the best in its lane I've heard this year as far as like metal albums go. And there have been some pretty great ones that have dropped, but I'm giving this an 8. I think this is a strong album. I think if you enjoy bands that toy with like black metal inspired stuff and shoegaze, they do a pretty good job with it on here. And I think that especially if you like the more shoegazy side of that scene, they do some cool stuff for their guitars here on top of that. And those are my reviews. Did you like them? Did you agree? Did you disagree? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, along with any other records from this year you want me to spin. If you did like this video, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week depending on what I've got going on. A casual September starts tomorrow, even though it was supposed to start today, because this week just hasn't been what I aimed for it to be. But either way, hopefully you enjoyed this. I'm going to go. I've been a viral rack. You guys have a good day, life situations, and I'll see you another day.